Welcome back to Reddit Whispers. What you're about to hear is a story that has been sitting in my chest for months, a heavy, cold stone that I haven't been able to dislodge. It's a story about trust, about the comfortable illusions we build our lives upon, and how quickly they can be demolished by a single glowing screen. It's about my wife, Ilara, the woman I thought I knew better than I knew myself, and the secret life she was living right under my nose. Our story begins not with a bang, but with the quietest of whispers, the subtle hum of a phone vibrating on a bedside table in the dead of night. For 28 years, our life together had a certain rhythm, a predictable and comforting cadence. We were Liam and Ilara, a unit, a name spoken as one by our friends and family. We had built a life from scratch, from a tiny, drafty apartment with mismatched furniture to this house, this solid brick-and-mortar testament to our shared history. Every scuff on the wooden floor, every faded patch on the living room sofa was a chapter in our book. We had raised 2 children, seen them off to university and then into their own lives, and were settling into that phase people romantically called the golden years. A time for us, a time to rediscover the 2 people who started it all before the chaos of parenthood descended. I thought we were happy. I truly did. It was a quiet happiness, the kind that doesn't scream from the rooftops but settles deep in your bones, a warmth against the encroaching chill of old age. Our evenings were filled with comfortable silences, the rustle of newspaper pages, the gentle clinking of wine glasses, the shared laughter at a familiar show on television. I loved that predictability. I craved it. It was the foundation upon which I had built my entire sense of security. The first change was almost imperceptible, a slight shift in the atmospheric pressure of our home. It started with her phone. The device, once a simple tool for calling the kids or looking up a recipe, became an extension of her hand. It was always with her, screened down on the dinner table, clutched in her palm as she walked from room to room, its faint blue light illuminating her face long after I had fallen asleep. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone was addicted to their phones. It was the modern condition. She had joined a new book club, reconnected with some old university friends on social media. She told me she was in a dozen different group chats, discussing everything from politics to gardening. "It's just silly stuff, Liam," she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand if I asked. "You'd be bored to tears." And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? This was Ilara, the woman who still couldn't lie about finishing the last of the good biscuits without a guilty flush creeping up her neck. Then came the girls' nights. They started innocently enough, once a month, a dinner with her friends Sophie and Clara. I encouraged it. I loved seeing her come home, cheeks flushed from wine and laughter, full of stories and gossip. It was good for her to have that, a space that was entirely her own. But once a month became every other week, and then soon it felt like every Friday night was a girls' night. The names of the friends started to blur. It wasn't just Sophie and Clara anymore. There were new names, women from her yoga class, from the book club, names I'd never heard before. Her excuses for coming home late grew more elaborate. "Oh, we just got to talking and lost all track of time." The traffic was an absolute nightmare. We decided to go for one last drink and the service was terribly slow. I'd be at home, the house unnaturally quiet, the clock on the mantelpiece ticking with an almost accusatory loudness. I'd make myself dinner, watch some bland documentary, and find myself glancing at the door every few minutes. A knot of something I couldn't name would tighten in my stomach. It wasn't suspicion, not yet. It was more like a low-grade loneliness, a feeling of being on the outside of a life that was suddenly vibrant and exciting and entirely separate from me. The first real crack in my blissful ignorance appeared on a Tuesday. It was an ordinary evening. Ilara was getting ready to go out, another impromptu dinner, this time with a woman named Anya from work whom I'd never met. She was in the bathroom and her phone, left on the kitchen counter, lit up. I was just walking by to get a glass of water. It was an instinct, a glance that lasted no more than a second, but it was enough. The notification wasn't a text message or a WhatsApp. It was an icon I didn't recognize, a stylized flame, bright orange against her floral wallpaper, and a name I didn't know, Leo, 28. The message preview was brief. Can't wait for tonight. Wear that blue dress. My heart did a strange little stutter step in my chest. Leo, 28, a man? I stood there, frozen, the glass of water forgotten in my hand. My mind scrambled for a rational explanation. It had to be a mistake, a wrong number, a spam message. Maybe Leo was Anya's son, and the message was for her, forwarded accidentally? It was absurd, but my brain was desperate to build a bridge back to the solid ground of my reality. When Ilara came out of the bathroom, she was wearing a blue dress. It was a new one, a shade of cobalt that I'd never seen on her before. It was beautiful, but it was also cut a little lower, a little tighter than she usually wore. "You look lovely," I managed to say, my voice sounding thin and reedy to my own ears. She smiled, a quick, distracted smile as she grabbed her purse and her phone. "Thanks, love. Don't wait up for me." She kissed my cheek, a fleeting brush of her lips, and then she was gone. The scent of a new, unfamiliar perfume lingering in the air. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in our bed, the space beside me cold and empty, and replayed that 1-second glance over and over in my mind. The flame icon, Leo, 28, the blue dress. It was a constellation of facts that pointed to a conclusion I was terrified to reach. I felt a profound sense of shame. I was spying on my wife. I was being paranoid. She would be horrified if she knew the thoughts running through my head. I was betraying her with my lack of trust. I tried to force the image out of my mind. I told myself I was being ridiculous, a foolish old man insecure about his wife finding a new lease on life. She was allowed to have new friends, to buy new dresses, to wear new perfume. I had no right to question it. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and in the fertile ground of my growing loneliness, it began to germinate. I started noticing things, tiny inconsistencies I would have previously ignored. She'd mention a film she supposedly saw with Sophie, but when I'd bring it up with Sophie's husband a week later at a barbecue, he'd look at me blankly and say Sophie had been home with a migraine all weekend. Ilara would come home smelling of cigarette smoke, but none of her close friends smoked. She'd have receipts in her purse from coffee shops on the other side of the city, miles away from her office or any of her friends' houses. Each discovery was a small tremor, shaking the foundations of our shared life. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught in a fog of suspicion and self-recrimination. I'd look at her as she sat across from me, reading a book or sipping her tea, and a chasm would open between us. Who was this woman? This woman with secrets in her phone and lies on her lips. I was so desperate for it to be a misunderstanding. I even began to construct elaborate innocent explanations for everything. The man, Leo, was a nephew of one of her friends, and they were all meeting up. The smell of smoke was from standing outside a bar. The coffee shops were just places she tried on a whim. I was clinging to the image of the Ilara I had known for 3 decades, the honest, dependable, slightly predictable woman I had married. I was trying to will her back into existence. But the woman who came home late at night, who guarded her phone like it was a state secret, who looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, was a stranger. And the feeling that I was living with this stranger was becoming more and more terrifying. I started to feel like a ghost in my own home, haunting the periphery of a life that no longer included me. The rhythm of our marriage had been replaced by a discordant melody of unanswered questions and unspoken fears. The silence between us was no longer comfortable. It was heavy with the weight of everything I couldn't bring myself to ask and everything she was clearly determined not to tell me. I would watch her tapping away on her phone, a small, secretive smile playing on her lips, and the cold knot in my stomach would twist into a sharp physical pain. The flame icon, I'd see it in my mind's eye, burning a hole in the fabric of our life. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my world was about to be set on fire. I just didn't know how to stop it. I was a man standing in a house made of memories, and I could smell the smoke, but I couldn't find the source of the blaze. The truth was, I was afraid to even look, because looking meant accepting that the life I had so carefully built, the person I had loved for so long, might be nothing more than a beautiful, elaborate illusion. And I wasn't ready to be that alone. Not yet. The weeks that followed that first glimpse of the flame icon were a masterclass in self-deception. I became a detective in my own life, but a reluctant one, a man searching for clues that would exonerate the suspect he loved, not condemn her. My days were a blur of feigned normalcy, while my nights were spent in a state of hypervigilance, cataloging every discrepancy, every subtle shift in Alara's behavior. The lie became a third person in our marriage, a silent, ever-present entity that sat between us at the dinner table and lay in the empty space in our bed. Her phone was the epicenter of this new fractured reality. It was a black mirror reflecting a life I wasn't part of. The constant stream of notifications created a soundtrack to my anxiety. A cheerful ping while we were watching a movie would cause my jaw to clench. A low buzz from her purse during a quiet meal would make my appetite vanish. She developed a new set of physical tics. The way she would angle the screen away from me, the casual but deliberate motion of flipping it face down on any surface, the slight jump in her shoulders if I walked into the room unexpectedly while she was typing. I started to learn the geography of her lies. Her book club meetings, which I once pictured in a cozy living room surrounded by literary women, now seemed to take place in suspiciously noisy environments. I'd call her just to hear her voice, and the background noise would be the clatter of a busy restaurant or the muffled soundtrack of a cinema, not the gentle murmur of a book discussion. "We decided to go out for a bite to eat after," she'd explain breathlessly, the lie so smooth, so practiced. It was a last-minute thing. Her stories became more intricate, layered with details designed to reassure me. She'd talk about a funny thing Sophie said, or a debate they had about a particular character in a novel. But it all felt rehearsed, like a script she was reading from. The spontaneity, the genuine joy she used to have after a night with friends was gone, replaced by a kind of brittle, high-energy performance. She was acting the part of the faithful wife, and the strain was beginning to show in the tiny cracks around her eyes, in the forced brightness of her smile. My own behavior became just as skewed. I found myself engaging in pathetic little acts of espionage. I checked the mileage on her car after she got home, trying to calculate if the distance matched her story. I'd casually browse the movie listings, cross-referencing them with the film she claimed to have seen. I'd scroll through our shared bank account statements, looking for unusual charges, my heart pounding with a mixture of shame and desperation. I found them, of course. Small transactions that didn't fit her narrative. 2 tickets for a film when she was supposedly alone. A charge at a bar in a neighborhood she never frequented. A payment for a hotel parking garage in a nearby town on a Saturday she was meant to be at an all-day yoga retreat. Each discovery was like a small, sharp pebble being dropped into my shoe. At first, it was a minor annoyance, easily ignored. But they accumulated, one after another, until walking became an agonizing ordeal. I was limping through my own life, and the pain was becoming unbearable. The worst part was the gaslighting, though I didn't have a name for it then. When I'd gently probe, my questions cloaked in casual curiosity, she would turn it back on me. "Why are you asking so many questions, Liam? Don't you trust me?" The question was a weapon, and it always hit its mark. It made me feel like the villain, the paranoid, controlling husband. My legitimate concerns were twisted into evidence of my own failing. And so I would retreat, mumbling apologies, feeling ashamed of my suspicion, even as the evidence mounted. I was caught in a vicious cycle. Her lies fueled my suspicion prompted my questions, and my questions were used as proof of my lack of trust, which in turn made her feel justified in her secrecy. We were in a death spiral, and I was too cowardly to pull the cord. I tried to reconnect with her, to remind us both of what we were in danger of losing. I planned a weekend away to the coast, to the same little guest house where we'd spent our honeymoon. I thought the sea air, the familiar streets, the memories held within those walls might somehow heal the growing rift between us. For a few hours, it almost worked. We walked along the beach, holding hands, the wind whipping her hair across her face. She looked like the girl I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But the illusion was shattered when she excused herself to take a call from her sister. She walked a long way down the beach, her back to me, her shoulders hunched over her phone. She was gone for almost half an hour. When she returned, the light in her eyes was gone, replaced by that familiar, guarded expression. The rest of the weekend was a hollow imitation of a romantic getaway. We went through the motions, but the connection was gone. It was like listening to a beautiful piece of music with a constant, jarring note of static underneath. The silence in the car on the way home was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I think, on some level, a part of her wanted to be caught. The lies were becoming sloppy, the excuses more threadbare. It was as if she was leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, daring me to follow. Or maybe she was just exhausted. Living a double life must be a profoundly tiring experience. The moment of clarity, the point of no return, came from the most mundane of sources, the laundry. I was gathering up the clothes from the hamper in our bathroom, a Sunday morning ritual. At the bottom, tangled in a towel, was a receipt. It was crumpled and slightly damp, but the ink was still legible. It was from a place called the Crimson Lounge, dated the previous Friday night, the night she was at her book club. The receipt was for 2 cocktails, a Negroni, her favorite, and something called a whiskey fiend. But it was the timestamp that made the blood drain from my face. 1:47 a.m. She had come home that night just after 2:30, telling me the book discussion had been particularly lively and they'd all gone back to Sophie's for a nightcap. But this receipt was from a trendy, expensive cocktail bar, the kind of place frequented by a much younger crowd, the kind of place I couldn't imagine Sophie or Clara setting foot in. It was a small thing, a flimsy piece of paper, but it was irrefutable proof. It was the keystone that made the entire arch of her lies collapse. All the other pieces, the late nights, the strange phone calls, the cinema tickets, the mileage on the car, slammed into place around it, forming a perfect, horrifying picture. I stood in the bathroom, the receipt clutched in my hand, the smell of lavender detergent filling the air. And for the first time, the fog of denial lifted completely. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was real. My wife, the woman I had shared my life with for nearly 3 decades, was lying to me. She was leading a secret life, a life of late-night cocktails with people who were not her friends. The question was no longer if she was deceiving me, but how and with whom. The need to know became a physical hunger. It gnawed at my insides, eclipsing any other thought or feeling. The shame of invading her privacy was burned away by the fire of my betrayal. That evening, I waited. I watched her across the dinner table, my expression carefully neutral, while a storm raged inside me. She was animated, talking about her day, about a problem at work, about a funny email she'd received. It was a masterful performance. I felt a cold, clinical detachment as I observed her, as if I were a scientist studying an alien species. She had no idea that I knew. She had no idea that the man sitting opposite her was not her husband, but her judge and jury. The opportunity came later that night. She fell asleep on the sofa watching television, a rare occurrence. Her phone was on the small table beside her, charging. I watched her for a long time, her chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. She looked so innocent, so vulnerable in her sleep. For a moment, I faltered. I could just let it go. I could throw the receipt away, pretend I had never seen it, and go on living in this comfortable lie. But I knew I couldn't. The poison was already in my system. I needed the antidote of the truth, no matter how bitter it tasted. My hands were trembling as I picked up the phone. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure it would wake her. Her passcode was our wedding anniversary. The irony was so cruel it was almost comical. I typed in the digits and the screen unlocked. I felt a jolt, a sickening lurch in my stomach as her home screen appeared. And there it was, in a folder neatly labeled social, nestled between Instagram and Facebook, was the app with the flame icon, Tinder. The name meant nothing and everything to me.
I had a vague understanding of what it was, a dating app for young people, a world of casual hookups and fleeting connections that was utterly alien to me. My finger hovered over the icon, a portal to a world I was terrified to enter. Taking a deep breath, a breath that felt like it was tearing my lungs, I tapped the screen. The app opened, and my life, as I knew it, ended.
The screen that loaded was a collage of faces, men's faces, mostly young, all smiling with a kind of predatory confidence. It took me a moment to understand what I was seeing. These were the men she was choosing from, swiping left or right, a casual dismissal or a digital invitation. But my focus wasn't on them. It was on the small circular icon in the corner of the screen, her profile picture. I tapped it and it expanded to fill the screen. It was a photo I had taken myself just a few months ago, on a sunny afternoon in our garden. She was laughing, her head tilted back, the sunlight catching the silver streaks in her hair. She looked beautiful, happy, and vibrant. My wife. But the context was all wrong. This intimate, private moment, a snapshot of our life together, was now being used as an advertisement, a piece of bait for strangers. I felt a wave of nausea. Then I read her bio, the few lines of text she had chosen to define herself to this world of strangers. Ilara, 49, rediscovering my zest for life. Love good wine, deep conversation, and spontaneous adventures. Not looking for anything serious, just fun and connection. Rediscovering her zest for life. The phrase was a dagger in my heart. Was I the one who had extinguished it? Was our comfortable, stable life a cage she was desperate to escape from? The age, 49, was a lie. She was 53. A small, vanity-fueled deception, perhaps, but it was part of a much larger, more monstrous one. And then I saw the messages. There were dozens of them, conversations with a revolving cast of men. I started scrolling, my thumb moving mechanically, my mind struggling to process the words. The names were a blur. Alex, 29. Ben, 31. Marco, 27. They were all so young, young enough to be her sons. The conversations were a sickening mix of banal small talk and thinly veiled innuendo. They complimented her picture, her smile. She, in turn, was flirtatious, witty, and bold in a way I hadn't seen in years. She was performing a version of herself, a younger, freer Alara, unburdened by a husband and 3 decades of shared history. I read messages planning the dates I now knew were lies. Coffee on Tuesday at 3? Can't wait to see you, read a message from a man named Tom. That was the day she had a dentist appointment that ran late. I saw the planning for the cinema trip with Leo, 28. He wrote, "That thriller looks intense. Maybe we can grab a drink after to calm our nerves." She replied with a winking emoji. That was the night she had been with Sophie, the night Sophie's husband had unknowingly exposed her lie. I kept scrolling, descending deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole of her secret life. I felt disembodied, like I was floating above myself, watching a man destroy his own world one swipe at a time. The sheer volume of it was staggering. This wasn't a one-time mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a systematic, ongoing campaign of deception. It was a part-time job, this curation of a secret identity, this juggling of men and dates and lies. I found the conversations about the trip to the nearby city, the one she had called a yoga retreat. It was with a man named Julian, 34. The messages were more explicit, filled with plans for their hotel room, for dinner, for the weekend they would spend together. I saw pictures he had sent her, pictures of himself, of the hotel, of the view from the window. And I saw pictures she had sent him, selfies of her in the new clothes she had bought, smiling coquettishly at the camera. She looked like a different woman, a woman I did not know at all. The air in my lungs felt thick and heavy, like I was breathing water. The foundation of our 28 years together, the trust that had been the bedrock of our marriage, had been pulverized into dust. Every shared memory was now tainted.
Every "I love you" she had ever said now seemed like a lie. Had she been thinking of them when I held her hand? Was she texting them from the bathroom while I made her morning coffee? The questions were a swarm of angry hornets in my head. I felt a rage building inside me, a cold, hard fury unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was a rage directed not just at her, but at the men, these young, opportunistic boys who saw my wife as a conquest, a fun connection. And I was furious at myself for my blindness, for my stupidity, for my willingness to believe her increasingly transparent lies. Had she been thinking of them when I held her hand? Was she texting them from the bathroom while I made her morning coffee? The questions were a swarm of angry hornets in my head. I felt a rage building inside me, a cold, hard fury unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was a rage directed not just at her, but at the men, these young, opportunistic boys who saw my wife as a conquest, a fun connection. And I was furious at myself for my blindness, for my stupidity, for my willingness to believe her increasingly transparent lies. Had she been thinking of them when I held her hand? Was she texting them from the bathroom while I made her morning coffee? The questions were a swarm of angry hornets in my head. I felt a rage building inside me, a cold, hard fury unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was a rage directed not just at her, but at the men, these young, opportunistic boys who saw my wife as a conquest, a fun connection. And I was furious at myself for my blindness, for my stupidity, for my willingness to believe her increasingly transparent lies.
I was an old fool, a cliché from a bad movie, the sleeping man whose wife crept out in the night. The confrontation was not a conscious decision. It was an inevitability, a chemical reaction that could no longer be contained. I walked back into the living room, the phone still in my hand, its screen glowing with the evidence of her betrayal. I didn't shout, I didn't throw things. My movements were slow, deliberate. I gently nudged her shoulder. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and soft with sleep. "Liam, what is it? What time is it?" she murmured. I said nothing. I just held out the phone, the screen open to her conversation with Julian. I watched her face as the sleepiness evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror. Her eyes widened, her mouth fell open slightly. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin a pasty, sickly white. She snatched the phone from my hand, her eyes darting between the screen and my face, her mind clearly racing, searching for an escape route, for another lie. But there was nowhere to run. The evidence was absolute. "It's not what you think," she stammered, the words hollow and unconvincing. It was a pathetic, reflexive defense. I just stared at her, my silence a more powerful accusation than any words could ever be. I wanted to see the woman I married. I wanted to see a flicker of remorse, of shame, of the Alara who couldn't lie about biscuits. But she wasn't there. The woman in front of me was a stranger, cornered and defensive. Her expression shifted from panic to defiance. "What were you doing going through my phone?" she demanded, her voice rising, trying to turn the tables, to make me the guilty one. "That is a complete invasion of my privacy." The audacity of it, the sheer hypocrisy was breathtaking. She had shattered the most sacred vows of our marriage, had lied to my face for months, had entertained a string of younger men behind my back, and her first instinct was to attack me for discovering it? In that moment, something inside me broke. It wasn't my heart, that had been breaking slowly for weeks. It was the image I had held of her, the carefully preserved portrait of the woman I loved. It shattered into a million tiny pieces, and I knew it could never be put back together. The argument that followed was ugly and protracted, a desperate, messy affair. She threw everything at me, that I was boring, that I was neglectful, that I had let the spark die. She said she felt invisible, that this was just a harmless bit of fun to make her feel alive again. She called them ego boosts,
just conversations, as if the dates and the hotel stays and the intricate web of lies were meaningless. She tried to minimize, to deflect, to rationalize, but I saw it for what it was, a profound and unforgiving betrayal. It wasn't about sex, not entirely. It was about the deception. It was the fact that she had looked me in the eye day after day and lied. She had built a wall between us, brick by brick, with every secret message, every clandestine meeting. And I had been on the other side, completely oblivious, tending to the garden of our life while she was planting weeds and poison. The house, our sanctuary, felt contaminated. Every room held a new painful memory. The kitchen counter where her phone had first lit up with a stranger's name. The bathroom where I found the receipt. The bed we had shared, now a symbol of her deception. The woman I had promised to love in sickness and in health was the sickness, a cancer of lies that had been metastasizing in the heart of our home. The house, our sanctuary, felt contaminated. Every room held a new painful memory. The kitchen counter where her phone had first lit up with a stranger's name. The bathroom where I found the receipt. The bed we had shared, now a symbol of her deception. The woman I had promised to love in sickness and in health was the sickness, a cancer of lies that had been metastasizing in the heart of our home. The house, our sanctuary, felt contaminated. Every room held a new painful memory. The kitchen counter where her phone had first lit up with a stranger's name. The bathroom where I found the receipt. The bed we had shared, now a symbol of her deception. The woman I had promised to love in sickness and in health was the sickness, a cancer of lies that had been metastasizing in the heart of our home. The house, our sanctuary, felt contaminated. Every room held a new painful memory. The kitchen counter where her phone had first lit up with a stranger's name. The bathroom where I found the receipt. The bed we had shared, now a symbol of her deception. The woman I had promised to love in sickness and in health was the sickness, a cancer of lies that had been metastasizing in the heart of our home.
That night, she slept in the guest room. The physical distance of a few meters felt like an unbridgeable canyon. I lay awake in our marital bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house roaring in my ears. The future I had always taken for granted, a comfortable path stretching out before us, had vanished. In its place was a fog, a terrifying, empty void. I had opened the door to her secret world, and in doing so, I had closed the door on my own. The life of Liam and Alara was over. I just didn't know what was supposed to come next. The aftermath of a discovery like this isn't a single explosive event. It's a slow, grinding demolition. In the days and weeks that followed that night, our house transformed from a home into a cold, silent museum of a dead marriage. We were two ghosts haunting the same space, communicating only in terse, necessary exchanges about bills and logistics. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and the bitter residue of her lies. I moved into the guest room permanently. I couldn't bear to sleep in our bed, to smell her perfume on the pillows, to feel the phantom weight of her next to me. Every object in that room was a testament to our shared history, a history that now felt like a work of fiction I had mistakenly believed to be true. I spent hours just walking through the house, touching things. The photograph of us on our wedding day, the collection of seashells from a long-ago family holiday, the worn armchair where I used to read to the children. Each item was a fresh wound. I was sifting through the wreckage of my life, trying to discern what was real and what had been part of the grand illusion. I found myself replaying our entire life together in my mind, searching for clues I had missed. Was that business trip she took 10 years ago really a business trip? Was her sudden interest in that evening class 5 years back as innocent as it seemed? The poison of her recent deception seeped backwards in time, tainting everything, casting a shadow of doubt over even our happiest memories. This, I think, was the cruelest part of the betrayal. It didn't just destroy our present and our future, it actively erased our past. The foundation I thought was built on solid rock was revealed to be sand,
and I was watching 3 decades of my life wash out to sea. Ilara, for her part, cycled through a bewildering array of emotional states. There were moments of tearful remorse where she would beg for forgiveness, promising it was a mistake, a symptom of a midlife crisis she didn't understand. She would swear it meant nothing, that she loved me, that she had been terrified of losing the comfortable life we had built. These moments were tempting. A part of me, the part that was exhausted and heartbroken and terrified of being alone, wanted to believe her. It would be so much easier to forgive, to pretend, to try and patch things up. But then the remorse would curdle into defensiveness and blame. She would accuse me of being emotionally distant, of taking her for granted, of not paying her enough attention. She painted me as the architect of her loneliness and her affairs as a desperate, if misguided, attempt to feel seen. It was a classic manipulation, reframing her betrayal as a consequence of my failings. And while I was willing to admit I wasn't a perfect husband, I could be quiet, preoccupied with work, set in my ways, I knew with every fiber of my being that my imperfections were not a justification for her actions. You don't fix a leaky tap in your marriage by flooding your neighbor's house. You talk, you work, you go to counseling. You don't create a secret profile and arrange clandestine meetings with men half your age. The digital nature of her infidelity was something I struggled to comprehend. It felt both cowardly and incredibly brazen. She could carry on entire relationships from the palm of her hand, right in front of me. The temptation was always there, just a click away. It offered an escape, a fantasy world where she could be a different person, a world without the mundane responsibilities and the comfortable but unexciting realities of a long-term marriage. Tinder and apps like it hadn't created the flaw in her character, but they had provided the perfect tool to exploit it. They offered a buffet of validation, an endless supply of men who would tell her she was beautiful and exciting, without any of the messy, complicated work of a real relationship. It was a shortcut to intimacy, or at least the illusion of it. I realized that what she had been chasing wasn't just sex, it was novelty. She was addicted to the thrill of the new, the validation of a new match, the excitement of a first date, the ego boost of being desired by someone young and attractive. Our life, our love, had become the comfortable old pair of shoes, and she had been secretly trying on shiny, new, ill-fitting stilettos. The process of separation was a brutal, administrative dismantling of a life. We had to divide assets, untangle finances, and decide what to do with the house. Every conversation was a negotiation, every decision a reminder of our failure. The house, which had once felt like a warm, living entity, the heart of our family, now felt like a cold, empty shell. The silence was deafening. I missed the little things the most. The sound of her humming in the kitchen, the way she would leave the newspaper folded to the crossword for me, the familiar weight of her head on my shoulder as we watched TV. I was mourning not just the woman I thought she was, but the simple, everyday comfort of our shared existence. Friends and family were difficult. We had to construct a public narrative, a sanitized version of the truth. We've grown apart, we'd say. It's a mutual decision. The lie was exhausting, but the truth was too humiliating to share. How do you tell your children that their mother was secretly dating men their own age? How do you explain to friends you've known for decades that the stable, loving marriage they admired was a sham? So I kept the sordid details to myself, and the secret festered inside me. Some days, I would be consumed by an all-encompassing anger. I would fantasize about confronting these men, these faceless profiles on a screen. What would I say to them? Would they even care about the life they had helped to destroy? I knew it was pointless. They were just symptoms of the disease, not the cause. The cause was Ilara and her choices. Other days, a profound sadness would descend, a wave of grief so powerful it would leave me breathless. I would see an elderly couple holding hands in the park and feel a pang of jealousy so sharp it was like a physical blow. That was supposed to be us. We were supposed to grow old together, to face the final chapter side by side. That future had been stolen from me, and I didn't know how to build a new one. I realized that trust is the most fragile thing in the world. It takes years, decades to build, layering it carefully, day by day, with shared experiences, honesty, and vulnerability. But it can be shattered in an instant. And once it's gone, truly gone, it can never be fully restored. You can glue the pieces of a broken vase back together, but the cracks will always be visible.
You will always be afraid to fill it with water, terrified that it will leak. Living without trust is like living in a house with no doors or windows, constantly exposed and vulnerable. I couldn't live like that. I couldn't spend the rest of my life checking her phone, questioning her whereabouts, second-guessing every word she said. The man who would do that was not a man I wanted to be. The decision to finally end it, to file for divorce, was both the hardest and the easiest thing I have ever done. It was an admission of defeat, the final, irrevocable end of the life I had known. But it was also an act of self-preservation. It was choosing an uncertain, lonely future over a certain, painful present. It was choosing to walk away from the ruins rather than spending the rest of my days trying to rebuild on a foundation of lies. I still don't have all the answers. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand why she did what she did. Maybe she doesn't even understand it herself. What I do know is that people are infinitely more complex and mysterious than we ever give them credit for. You can share a bed with someone for 30 years and still not know the secrets they hold in their heart, or the parallel lives they can construct on a 6-inch screen. The digital world has given us new and terrifyingly efficient ways to betray the people we claim to love. It allows us to compartmentalize our lives, to be a loving spouse one minute and a seductive stranger the next. It's a Pandora's box of temptation, and for some, the allure is too strong to resist. I am still learning how to be a me after so many years of being an us. The silence in my new, smaller apartment is still a shock to the system some days. But slowly, very slowly, I am beginning to find a new rhythm. The pain is still there, a dull ache where a vital part of me used to be. But it no longer consumes me. I have started to see that this ending, as devastating as it was, is also a beginning. It's a chance to build a life on a new foundation, one of honesty and self-respect. A life where I am not a ghost in my own home, a detective in my own marriage. A life where the silence is not heavy with lies, but filled with the possibility of peace. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear from you what moment in your life made you see someone for who they truly were. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Reddit Whispers, where the real stories get told.